and welcome to another edition of Dialogue, coming to you live from Beijing on the CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. China's Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi is in Moscow, where he met Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday. They discussed the comprehensive strategic partnership and expanding cooperation between the two sides. Xi Jinping, the new Chinese head of the Communist Party, is expected to visit Moscow after China's annual parliamentary session before heading for BRICS summit in South Africa. Many expect that visit to be an important one in setting the tone of relations between China and Russia in a new era. China-Russia relations have been evolving over the years. What exactly is the current status of it, and where is it heading for? To answer those questions, let's take a look at this short clip.
Frequent exchange of visits. Are China and Russia each other's diplomatic priority? DPRK, Iran, Middle East, Africa, can the two work with the West on some of the crucial issues? Energy cooperation, border trade. What can still be some of the uncertainties in the bilateral relations? China becoming a power, Russia maintaining importance. Will the two have more and more common ground?
And joining us now in the studio to talk about the current status of relations between China and Russia and where is it heading for, we're having Mr. Qiuyuan, Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome, sir. And also joining us in the studio, Mr. Ye Hailin, Current Affairs Commentator. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. First of all, help us to understand this. Where is that little flag indicating the relations between China and Russia being put in the overall map of China's diplomacy in this new era? Let's begin with you, Mr. Lin.
If I may say so, I will say it's a priority of the priorities. We can say that in 2003, our new president, then the new president, Hu Jintao, paid the first country to visit is in Russia. But now we also say after 10 years, it's also our new president, the first visiting country is also Russia. I think it means a lot of things.
Is it still the top priority for China?
Oh, well, I think
why?
One of the top priorities. United States-China-U.S. relations remain as a top priority for China's diplomacy, while Russia is also one top priority because, first of all, Russia and China are two great neighbors. We have more than 4,300 kilometers common border.
Right.
So if China wants to have a self-rule, we must have a good relations with Russia. Secondly, we have a very good economic relations, especially energy cooperation between China and Russia. Thirdly, China and Russia are two great powers, have a global influence. And we remember, when President Hu Jintao visited Russia, the two presidents reached a declaration, announcement on world affairs. It's not very much to see.
Right.
And we have identical or very similar views on the world affairs.
Well, we all understand, even though there has been some periods of traditional friendship between China and Russia, even during the former Soviet days, there were differences also. So at this moment, if you take a look at the history, let's just say it's 6 decades back, we're at the highest point, or we're in the middle, or where is it compared to the recent history? Mr. Ye.
I think we always say it's the best moment, but we hear it a lot from the different periods. We always say here is the best moment, and after several years, we see it again. But now, actually, it's the most normal relation between China and Russia. We can trace back to the China and the Soviet Union era, but at that time, it's not very normal. Actually, it's a lot of something is abnormal. It's beyond the country relationship. It's turning into the party and even the leadership. But now we can say it's a country-wide and a very normal relationship. Means we respect our counterpart, and then we know where is the demarcation. We don't have much expectation on the other side because we know we are the big country, so we have to protect ourselves. And we have the loyalty to the other side, but we don't request too much.
Interesting you talk about the demarcation line in terms of where the two countries expect the relations to go, to what extent. Some have been suggesting that the previous friendship was more about the ideological unity back in the Cold War era. But these days, the relations is more of a very normal trade relations. And besides that, it is almost impossible to see that the two countries can be very close allies, except, let's say, in the UN Security Council. Mr. Ye, I want your opinion here, and then let's go to Professor Tao.
In my understanding, so we not only on the economy relation or the base, we are not only the business partner. We have much in common. We share a lot of views on the international issue, for example, in Syria. So it's much more than the so-called the business counterpart. But the question is that, what's the foundation for China and Russia?
What do you think?
Actually, my understanding is that because we are all agree that the world, the whole world, the global system should be based on the mutual respect on the sovereignty, not jeopardize another country's sovereignty and respect. So we have something, principally, we have something in common. That's the foundation.
Is that rather a advocacy point of the two countries, or rather the two countries have been closely in history following that advocate slogan, rather, not to interfere into others' internal affairs?
Certainly, we have a lot of lessons to learn from the history of Sino-Soviet relations or from Sino-Russian relations.
What do you mean by that?
A lot of we used to have a honeymoon, we used to have a confrontation, we used to have a border conflict, etc. A lot. But today, I think Sino-Russian relations is based on several things. Politically, we are both responsible stakeholders of international society. For instance, we both support NPT. We are both parties of six-party talks on DPRK's nuclear issue, and we are both participating in 5+1 and Iran's talks on Iranian nuclear issue, and we both support multilateralism. We both support democratization of international regime, etc. So this is, I think, is a political base. Secondly, China and Russia, as we have said, shared a very long border.
Right.
And this border today is a border of peace, of friendship, and cooperation.
We hope that is the case. So let's talk about some of the specific issues. Both of you touched on trade. Yes, indeed, it seems that the cooperation between the two countries has been based on some of the competitive advantages that each other has for the others. For example, China has been importing oil and energy coming from Russia, and also there has been technology transfer, even weapon sales between the two countries. On the other hand, many would ask, what can be the ultimate urge from Russia in developing this trade relation with China? Are they also trying to find alternatives, just as China is trying to find an alternative when it comes to energy and oil supplies around the world?
Well, Russia is one of the largest oil exporter in the world today. But actually, Russia mainly exports energy to Europe. More than 80% of Russia's oil goes to Europe.
Actually, we are the alternative.
China is an alternative, but other countries also, South Korea and Japan also are alternative. So Russia wants to diversify its export destinations. And China, we import a lot of energy, but our energy, more than 50%, is imported from Gulf region, and then from Africa. So the oil we imported from Russia is less than 10%, but it's also important, and we have a lot of potential to develop.
But not only for this, I think for Russia, in Russia's perspective, they have, for them, the alternative also means something else. Means they don't only want to sell the natural gas and the oil to China, also their manufacturers, including the military equipments, and there are some industry equipments to China. Russia is the country who has a long history to be a high level of the industrialized country. So that's why Russia wants to catch up this position But now we know we have some problems. For the last 20 years, China's economy and the industry level is also increased. So there's something maybe we still need to negotiate and to have a good business, and means we should find something more than the natural gas.
Okay, that's very an interesting point, because right now you see there has been talk, at least, about the establishment of special economic zones on the border between China and Russia, though there are different attitudes apparently coming from both sides of the border, at least from the central government. Moscow seemed to be, some say, not that enthusiastic about this so-called regionalization going on across the border. Well, Beijing is very enthusiastic together with some of the local governments in the area. So how can we see these relatively different attitudes? How can we understand that?
We always say that if you want to buy something from another, you can speak your own language because you paid money. But if you want to sell something to another, you have to speak their language. Because it's something you want to get some money from them.
Obviously, this is not just a language problem.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that in the case between China and Russia, China shouldn't push Russia too hard. We should understand they have some very unique situation.
Like what?
Their Asia part, it's vast area but few people. So the open to the outside world really brings some risk. And not only in their perspective, it's also the fact. So if we try to push them too hard, actually we close the door. So that is, I think, for China, especially for some border areas from our northeast, when they try to raise some proposal to the Russian counterpart, careful to their words. That not only so you have to open your areas, otherwise this is not a good attitude.
But
I think
it's not just a problem between Russia and China.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a problem in Russia. Russian leaders, even Soviet leaders, for a long time realized that to develop Asia part, develop Siberia, would make Russia stronger. But actually we know that there's a little population in vast area of Siberia, and it needs a lot of human resources and foreign investment. But Russia is afraid, if we introduce China human resources from China, then there will be flooding of Chinese in the area. So for a long, long time, Russian leaders have been in a very
struggling with that idea of developing the Asian part of Russia. Here's the interesting thing, because we talk about developing the Asian part of Russia, which is very significant, I guess, for the neighboring country of China. That is, you've witnessed some of the phenomena over the past few years that Russia have been putting efforts into developing that area. For example, just one very specific one, Russia was trying to host the Asia Pacific Summit last year, Vladivostok. That seemed to be a very firm commitment to develop these areas. But how far is the dream from the reality? That's another question, Mr. Chao.
Oh, this is still a long, long way to go, I think. First of all, it's for Russia to make a right policy, whether you are determined to develop this area and how to develop. According to President Vladimir Putin, he said he determined to develop that area because there's a great potential.
Right.
Yeah, and how to develop? It's really a problem. You cannot introduce human resources in a very big volume from other countries except China.
Well,
frankly speaking.
As we Chinese believe, it can be a problem, it can be an opportunity in disguise as well.
Yeah.
But having said that, though, Mr. Ye, help us to understand where is it really going? I mean, this region, China, first of all, in the Asia-Pacific region, the United States is now already well known for its so-called pivot to Asia. And now Russia also wants to play an active role in the region. Is it too crowded, Mr. Ye?
I don't think so, because I think Russia won't be the very decisive player in this region. They're still focusing on the western side, not in the eastern side. And for another issue, for the Russian, he play some political game or some symbolic action in this region. So basically, it's for the reputation. Russia needs to be recognized as the regional power, but Russia is not the country who really devoted into this region. See the case of the DPRK nuclear test. Actually, for the sixth party talks, Russia is not the mainstream of these talks. It's on the table, but it's not the most important seat. It's a little bit different. For the Russia, the first and the foremost diplomacy target is still in the West, in Europe.
Having said all of these, gentlemen, one very crucial question that is upcoming. What will be some of the most important issues that the state leaders from both countries, Mr. Putin and also the new Chinese president after the parliamentary session going to Russia, will discuss? What will be those crucial issues? You can name some of them.
I think first and foremost will be the international system, actually, for the whole world issue. Russia and China is not only the neighboring country, we're focusing on the world affairs. So the principle, the lay down the foundation for the future is the most important, and I think they can reach much in common.
The international political system.
Well, I think to name some specific issues, this year Russia is going to hold the G20 summit. So probably the two leaders will discuss what's going on at the summit. Because each time, even in the past, before the summit, China always consulted with the host countries. Right. So this time, I think they will discuss. And then DPRK's nuclear issue. This is a crucial issue after DPRK's third nuclear test and the geopolitical situation in Northeast Asia and also Middle East. I think because Russia enjoys a great influence in the Middle East, in Iranian nuclear issue, in Syrian issue. So China and Russia certainly will discuss about Middle East development.
A lot of issues on the table. The question really is, are the two countries consulting and even united with one another really to counter one of the biggest power in the world, such as the United States, or it is for different reasons? Gentlemen, we're going to discuss these and many others right after this break. We'll be right back.
Frequent exchange of visits. Are China and Russia each other's diplomatic priority? DPRK, Iran, Middle East, Africa, can the two work with the West on some of the crucial issues? Energy cooperation, border trade. What can still be some of the uncertainties in the bilateral relations? China becoming a power, Russia maintaining importance. Will the two have more and more common ground?
A lot of questions to be answered, and join us once again in the studio for the second half of our program, Mr. Tao Wenzhao, Research Fellow from the China Academy of Social Sciences, and Mr. Ye Hailin, Current Affairs Commentator. Gentlemen, earlier we've been discussing about the possible visit by the new Chinese president to Russia and how the two countries are placing each other in terms of the priority of their diplomacy. And now let's talk about their diplomacy, overall speaking. First of all, what is this unity of China and Russia about, if there is any? Is it about trying to correct the wrongs in the international system, or is it about trying to counter the only superpower that is in the world today, the United States? Mr. Ye.
I think both China and Russia is their diplomacy target is not only counter the Americans' role in the world. None of these two countries want to top down the whole system. They want to make some correct action and to defend their own interest and protect the principle of the international community. That was the essential issue for both two countries. That's why I mentioned before that in the earlier dialogue, I said it's laid the foundation for the future coordination, not necessarily the cooperation, but the coordination.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, Mr. Tao?
Oh, well, I would say that Chinese leaders work for China's own interests, national interests. Russian leaders work for Russia's national interests. But the two countries' interests, in many aspects, are overlapping.
Let's talk about the UN Security Council as members, a permanent member of it. There have been a lot of talks and obvious division about what exactly should be the priority of the UN Security Council and with what principle. Some advocate interference when crisis, quote unquote, arises. And others, such as China and Russia, always advocate that there should not be interference into any other country's internal affairs. At this moment, which one is getting the upper hand, Mr. Tao?
Oh, well, I think the non-interference principle is still the principle of the United Nations. It is written into the Charter of the United Nations. Yeah. So, although, for instance, in Libya, Security Council passed a resolution, and then NATO launched the air attack on Libya, and causing the Gaddafi's overthrown.
And now you have Syria.
Yeah, and Syria, of course, Russia and China both think that United Nations and the outside world should not interfere in Syria's domestic affairs, and should let the different parts, different ethnic groups, different religious groups to resolve Syrian question through the peaceful way. So I think this is a consensus.
The really argument is that for the rest of the UN Security Council permanent seats, I mean, that's 3 countries. Usually they argue, see what you did, you can't solve this problem. So we had to interfere in their domestic issue. See the case in Syria because, okay, China and Russia's plan not solve their domestic conflicts. But our argument, our point is that, the China and Russia's point is that, see what you get from your interference.
Right.
The consequence is
so
different.
The question really is how to keep that balance while at the same time pushing things for the better result if possible. How to make sure not to interfere too much into others' internal affairs. That's really the ultimate question.
There is no such thing that there is no way out. There is only one way we can do that, so we do that. This is the Munich way. We can trace back in 80 years when the Chamberlain thought this is unsolvable for the Germans rising, so make the compromise. And then what do you get? The Second World War. So
well, now you've got more crises going on because there's DPRK, there's Iran, the nuclear issues, and certainly with the recent nuclear test from DPRK, things are getting much more complicated.
The DPRK's nuclear test bring a lot of issues, but doesn't mean sanction or even military attack is the option. You only make the situation worse.
So what is the option? Many from the West would ask that question to both China and Russia.
That's the question is that China and Russia in the DPRK case, is we should understand why they have the nuclear ties, and then can we create a kind of the environment to increase the dialogue, to convince them to not do that again.
Here is the thing, Mr. Tao. When China and Russia, 2 countries, are questioning about whether the ideology or the ideas of diplomacy from other countries, will they be able to provide real alternatives to bring the issue closer to resolve?
No.
That's the question being asked.
No, we don't emphasize an ideological factor in diplomacy. Since China opened to the outside world in 1978, and especially at the 12th Party Congress in 1982, we formally announced independent foreign policy for peace. And we said that China is going to decide its own attitude according to each case, and not according to the social system or ideology. So we don't make ideology as our criteria for our decision. So with regard to the DPRK's issue, I think this is a very complicated issue because it is a result, vicious result, of 60 years of confrontation, hostility between DPRK and the United States. At several international conferences, I argue there should be 2 processes. One process is denuclearization process. The other process is integrating DPRK into the world community, especially the Northeast Asia regional community. From its seclusion, from its isolation. You cannot let it be further isolated. So for that case, for that purpose, China maintains a normal trade and economic relations with the DPRK.
Even though China and Russia are going to be in close consultation with one another on issues such as Iran, on issues such as DPRK, many argue, though, here in China, that the ultimate solution really lies in the direct parties involved, meaning DPRK and the United States, Iran and the United States, because each other see the other as the threat toward their own ultimate security.
Actually, I think for the Iran case, it's a little bit different. It's because it's not only direct dialogue between U.S. and Iran can solve this problem. The regional country also has to involve, such as the Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and most important, Israel. So the Iran case is more comprehensive and more complicated. Not only always the DPRK experiments, if there is some experience, could be applied. So that's why we had to create a new mechanism for the Iran issue.
Right. And now joining us, finally, we get across to Mr. Alexander Lukin, Vice President of Diplomatic Academy in Russia. Mr. Lukin, welcome to the program. Before we go, we would like to have your views. On the one hand, you see China rising, not only in the region, but also in the world. On the other hand, you see Russia trying to maintain its influence and significance in this part of the world, and also, overall speaking, where do you think the common ground will be for the two countries?
Well, in the modern world, actually, countries don't have to be enemies. We have a win-win situation, and of course in Russia we welcome the rise of China, and that China is becoming a more modern and a more modern, advanced country, and I think it would be wise for Russia to use this opportunity, a strong, especially strong trade-wise country, and economically strong for our own needs. So we of course welcome a strong and important China in the world. Besides geopolitically, we also welcome that China is a strong country, because the more different countries we have in the world, the more stable it is.
Well, Mr. Lukin, as you may know, both China and Russia, as countries, are countries facing issues such as corruption and the reform of the government. Do you think, though, in the near future, that the two countries can compare notes despite of the different political system that the two countries have?
Well, corruption, of course, is a problem in Russia and perhaps in China also. I don't know. I've never met anything like that in China. But this is an internal problem, and we are going to fight it by ourselves, I think, without any outside help.
Alexander Lukin, Vice President of the Diplomatic Academy in Russia, thank you so much. And we also want to thank our two panelists in the studio, Mr. Tawen Zhao and Mr. Li Hailin. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And thank you for watching. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Before heading for BRICS summit in South Africa, many expect that visit to be an important one in setting the tone of relations between China and Russia in a new era. China-Russia relations have been evolving over the years. What exactly is the current status of it, and where is it heading for? To answer those questions, let's take a look at this short clip.
Frequent exchange of visits. Are China and Russia each other's diplomatic priority? DPRK, Iran, Middle East, Africa, can the two work with the West on some of the crucial issues? Energy cooperation, border trade, what can still be
promised? While Russia is also one top priority, because first of all, Russia and China are two great neighbors. We have more than 4,300 kilometers common border.
Right.
So if China wants to have self-rule, we must have a good relations with Russia. Secondly, we have a very good economic relations, especially energy cooperation between China and Russia. Thirdly, China and Russia are two great powers, have global influence. And we remember, when President Hu Jintao visited Russia, the two
Hello and welcome to another edition of Dialogue, coming to you live from Beijing on the CCTV News. I'm your host, Qiuyuan. China's Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi is in Moscow, where he met Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday. They discussed the comprehensive strategic partnership and expanding cooperation between the two sides. Xi Jinping, the new Chinese head of the Communist Party, is expected to visit Moscow after China's annual parliamentary session.
Some of the uncertainties in the bilateral relations. China becoming a power, Russia maintaining importance. Will the two have more and more common ground?
And joining us now in the studio to talk about the current status of relations between China and Russia and where is it heading for, we're having Mr. Tao Wen-zhao, Research Fellow with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome, sir. And also joining us in the studio, Mr. Ye Hailin, Current Affairs Commentator. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. First of all, help us to understand this. Where is that little flag indicating the relations between China and Russia being put in the overall map of China's diplomacy in this new era? Let's begin with you, Mr. Lin.
If I may say so, I will say it's a priority of the priorities. We can say that in 2003, our new president, then the new president, Hu Jintao paid the first country to visit is in Russia. But now we also say after 10 years, it's also our new president's the first visiting country is also Russia. I think it means a lot of things.
Is it still the top priority for China?
I think
why?
One of the top priorities. United States-China-U.S. relations remain as a top priority for China's diplomacy.